Hello and welcome to another episode of The Voice for American Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Randy Sutton, a retired police lieutenant with 34 years of law enforcement service, the founder of the Wounded Blue, the National Assistance and Support Organization for Injured and Disabled Officers, and the author of A Cop's Life and the soon-to-be-released Rescuing 911, the Fight for America's Safety. Thanks for joining me again on another episode of a show that is all about law enforcement. And I got a great guest waiting for us in the interview room, so let's bring him on right now. His name is Douglas Parker. He is a 30-year veteran of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I'm going to bring up his bio here for a minute. He's the CEO and president of 7-8 Technologies, and he is the creator of an incredible new law enforcement service called the Thin Blue Defend. This is going to be really interesting for my law enforcement audience out there. So Doug has over 30 years with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He's worked with law enforcement officers involving major uses of force for many years. He's been a consultant to attorneys. And as a result of his experience, he developed a mobile and web-based app called Thin Blue Defend, which officers use to collect data from a critical incident in anticipation of criminal and or civil litigation. It's now nationwide and available at thinbluedefend.com. Thanks for joining me today, Doug. Thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk about your career and also about the new app that you've developed.
Yeah, definite pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for having me, and good to talk to you again. We met out in Phoenix a while back, so good to connect back up. Thank you, sir.
Well, so I want the audience to know that, Doug and I connected a couple of years ago, I think it's been, and he was in the development stage, and we talked at length about use of force and about the many pitfalls that officers find themselves when it comes down to critical incidents. And Doug was in the development stage of what I recognize to be something that could be, I mean, I don't want to sound dramatic, but could be life-saving, definitely for career-saving for law enforcement officers. So we've been staying in communication all this time, and now finally you've given birth, Doug, to this incredible new app. So first of all, let's talk about what your history has been involving law enforcement, and then we'll get into why you developed this incredible product.
Yeah, I grew up in a law enforcement family. My dad was chief of police in Clayton County below Atlanta, and was very interested in law enforcement because of that, because he took me on a liquor steal raid when I was 14. We got shot at. So it was in my blood. So I had to stay in law enforcement, even though I was good friends with Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy, and he offered me a Chick-fil-A anywhere I wanted in the United States, and I had to turn him down because of, it's a calling. You've got to do it. I could have been definitely well off with money, but that's not the purpose when you get into law enforcement.
You turned down a Chick-fil-A franchise?
Yes, sir, afraid so.
Okay, well, that certainly shows your commitment to law enforcement. I can tell you that. All right, so talk about, many people don't know what the GBI is. If you would, fill them in a little bit.
Sure, real quick, we're a requested agency. In other words, if your house gets broken into, you couldn't call us. We were asked by sheriffs, chiefs, district attorneys, and the discretion of the governor to work on cases. And they were mainly the major cases, mainly homicides, the robberies, child molestations, those types of things. And we're also very much in dignitary protection during the time I was assigned to the Olympics in Atlanta for over a year and a half, because some of the venues were on state property. Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House. He lived in Georgia. He was not afforded Secret Service protection when he came back home, so we had to pick him up. So I was on a rotating detail with Newt Gingrich, the Speaker, during that time. But just being called out all kinds of times of the night, day to work on homicide, mainly homicides,
So
and use of force cases.
right, use of force cases for sure. You guys handle a lot of the officer involved shootings, correct?
Yeah, and I started back before Graham v. Connor, so the standard was different then. I could just walk in. If I could get the officer to say I was in fear for my life, that was the standard. And then it changed. So that's why over the years working those cases, and then after retiring, working with attorneys who represent these officers, I saw a very disconnect between the officer and the attorney as to what information was important and getting that information from the officer to that attorney.
So that was the impetus for you to create. And now you've been working on this project for years. So let's talk about this. So you saw a need. Let's talk. Let's be very clear that major uses of force by law enforcement is probably the hottest topic involving this career field. It is literally on the news every single day. So you recognized a need. Talk about that need and then how you developed this technology.
Yeah, I was working a case 4 years ago down in Kingsland. A young officer shot and killed a suspect. Excellent shooting, but was charged with, the DA wanted to charge with murder, ended up with a grand jury indictment of involuntary and voluntary manslaughter. And I was doing the forensic walkthrough with the officer, at the time at 1 o'clock in the morning when this happened. And I was asking this officer, what were you thinking when you made this action or made this move? And he would tell me, and I would say, and I already knew what he had told his attorney because I got in a week later. And I said, well, why didn't you tell your attorney that last week? He said, well, I didn't think it was that important. After the third, I don't think it was that important, that's when it went off in my head. I said, we've got to have a way for these officers to get this important information to their attorney, because the attorney wasn't there. Nobody was there. And in the Supreme Court ruling says that comes from the officer's mind. In other words, what was reasonable given those facts and circumstances during that incident. And that's what is important.
All right, I'm going to stop you right there, because what you just gave is probably the most critical information that my viewers and listeners can fully understand. The use of deadly force is by its very nature the most important decision that a police officer, law enforcement officer, can make in his entire career, maybe in his entire life. So there have been adjustments or changes in the legal definition of being justified in using deadly force. So let's talk about what you just said, because this is critical information and also very, very germane to why you created what you did. Let's talk about the legal issues now of when a police officer makes a decision to use deadly force.
Yeah, and again, getting that information out, but according to the rulings, is being able to answer those cognitive questions. Again, it's not how many times did you pull the trigger, it's why did you pull the trigger? And that's what really needs to be brought out. And again, you got to understand, this app is for the officer's defense. This is not for the department. It's not for an agency. This is in anticipation of civil and or criminal litigation.
Okay, so what this app does is allow a kind of like an organized thought process for the officer to guide him through what is going to be required for his defense. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, sure. Because even to and this one officer was fighting on the ground with a suspect. Later on, started having medical issues with headaches and some body parts that were hurting. But at the time, he said, I don't need to be seen by an EMT. Well, that became very important, because up on the stand, when this officer was testifying, by the way, we got not guilties on these charges.
Good to hear.
Great attorney also. The DA actually, the ADA actually admonished the officer, said, well, you know what? This wasn't in your initial report. Are you just now making this up to try to fit the narrative in front of these jurors?
Right, and this is why this is so critical. Having been involved in several officer-involved shootings, I know from my own experience that there's such a rush of information, of emotion, of fear, of consequences. There's so much going on in your brain when you're involved in a critical incident like this that to organize the thoughts is really, really difficult. So let's talk about the app itself and what it does to help these officers.
Yeah, actually, I have a lot of attorneys that have purchased that because they want it on their phone as they interview their own client to make sure that all that information is brought out. But it's just a process. The whole app is user-friendly. You don't have to type anything, which there are places to type, but mainly drop-down boxes and a place for your audio to access your audio recording and your camera, and leads you through tons of categories based on a lot of situations that I've seen and been in myself to document that process. So it leads you through it. And then you're able at the end to hit a button and it sends it to your attorney in a file.
All right, a legal question. Discovery is the process in which both the defense and the prosecution have to give information to one another for preparation for trial. That's basically what quote discovery is, unquote. How does this app? How does the discovery issues? How does it affect this app?
Well, that'll be based on the attorney. I mean, because you're providing this only to your attorney, so your attorney will make that decision as to exchange of information through the discovery process. So that'll be done through them.
So is this? So would this be considered attorney-client privilege because this is a communication only for your attorney?
Right, and since it's only to be used on a personal cell phone, this is labeled as attorney-client work product. In fact, if it is hooked up to a law enforcement device, they're met with advisements of that. But the good thing is, when you are online inputting this information within the app, nothing is stored on your personal cell phone. It goes immediately to an encrypted cloud where that's protected. So nothing is stored on your phone.
So so this is relatively new. When did this go into use commercially?
About 3 weeks ago, we had a local sheriff's department here that helped us out through the testing and provided us, bodies when we needed everybody just to touch buttons, make sure everything worked. But it went nationwide then with him. He was the first one.
So this is brand spanking new. And you're hearing it, folks, you are hearing it here first on The Voice for American Law Enforcement. And that's what this show is all about, is about getting information about cutting edge technology, as this is one of them. But still, the challenges are in the future for you, as far as, because this is so new, that there are going to be legal challenges down the road. Don't you agree?
Oh, sure. And we're preparing for that. But as far as right now, we are patent pending. We do have a copyright on the material, so it is protected information. Now, that doesn't stop someone from trying to copy us. But there again, we're trying to help the police officers. So we want this to really go nationwide to help protect these officers, because one proof of concept, and I can't discuss the case because it's still in litigation, but in Georgia, an officer can testify before a grand jury. The officer, prior to going to grand jury, prepared a page and a half. When we went through this app, it turned out to be 35 pages long that was provided to the grand jury, and there was a no bill on that one.
Wow, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. When you're thinking about, you're a member of a police agency, you're a law enforcement agency, in your mind that you may be called upon at some time in your career to make a deadly force decision. and you try to prepare mentally, you try to prepare physically, you go to the range, you go to training, but rarely do we think about what the consequences are going to be legally. And we have seen, and part of, what I'm going to talk about after our interview is done is what I call the war on cops. And the war on cops is not just physical. The war on cops is sociological. The war on cops is legal. We're seeing more and more district attorneys, quote, activist, unquote, district attorneys who are targeting law enforcement officers when they use deadly force, no matter how justified it is. So having every tool in your tool bag as a law enforcement officer is critical. And so tell me how, I know you worked with a police agency to get this, basically test this app. How do officers obtain it, and what are the costs involved?
Yeah, just go to, like you said, www.thinbluedefend.com, and there's a sign up there. What we're doing is we're offering individual users, if you pay a whole year, I think it's $239 for a year, but we're offering, if an agency will contact us, we will give, depending on how many people or how many officers you have, we'll give a discount based on the number of officers that the agency employs.
Now, a question is, if the department is paying for it, does that give more? I mean, does the department then have access to the records?
No, it's just like an agency that pays for a PBA or FOP, but the agency has no access. In fact, we don't have access to the information ourselves that's placed into the app.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that's interesting, and that's critical information as well. So, as of now, I mean, literally, you're 3 weeks into this. You got to be really excited about the opportunity here. That literally, you could be saving the careers of thousands of police officers in the future. What's been your feedback from the law enforcement officers that use this?
Yeah, again, some of them do have hesitation because they think that information is stored on the cell phone, and they're worried about search and seizure on their device. But again, we've addressed those issues. But yeah, I mean, what we've had from the ones that I've helped represent over the past 2 or 3 years, utilizing that, which has been in my head, going through the interview process with them. I mean, it's amazing that they said, I've had statements like, I didn't realize that was important. And the people that have been in critical incidents have said, that have seen that, said, I wish that I'd have had it then because it would have helped out in my case also.
Sure. Right. Well, this is exciting. I know, and this is, a culmination of years of your labor. I mean, did you have a technology background? I mean, because this sounds like a pretty, technical piece of work here.
It is, and I'm the worst with technology. And somebody told me, because my statement has always been, give me 2 dead bodies on the ground. That's what I'm worth. And somebody said, Doug, you're a technology company now. And I said, well, never thought about it that way, but that's what it's turned out to be, because we have other verticals we're working on, even for the private citizen. God, what about the case in New York, the convenience store worker, to be able to document what happened in that? Again, not so much, what the camera shows, because it's what comes from the person's mind as to why that person made the decisions to use force or even tactical movements. You got to explain all that. And the difference in a gun and a taser, you better document every pull of the trigger because that requires a different thought process, because things change. The suspect did this, now I had to pull the trigger again. So that needs to be documented, each trigger pull.
All right. Now, is this going to be used? I mean, it sounds like you can use this for any use of force. Is that correct? I mean, this doesn't have to be a deadly force situation, correct?
No, it started out deadly force, but as you have seen, the past 2 or 3 years, by gosh, if you just twist somebody's arm thinking there's going to be some civil litigation, you better document, why you had to fight somebody or any use of force.
Right. So this has so many uses for law enforcement. I didn't think about the civilian portion of this, but I mean, because every cop knows that you're going to be in a fight. You're going to be in a use of force situation
Right.
somewhere down the road, right? So this seems to be like, just like having a tool on your duty belt that you're going to be that you need for your, for your career. So a cop, this is a no-brainer for me as far as having this service at your fingertips. But I wouldn't even
Well,
think about a civilian.
yeah, but think about it, Randy. If you shoot somebody and your department terminates you immediately, you have no access to anything they have, even your training records. There's a few extra things there where we do keep up with training records. What you've received in training, because that will become important for your attorney right then. And so you're cut off from all that. It's just like cameras or any type of documents within the department. You're out. So we have some places in there to document certain information.
Well, I think this is an amazing new product that you brought to the field of law enforcement. And I from the moment you told me about it, I recognized the importance of this. And so I'm really happy to help you through this program and also through, let me say this, my organization, the Wounded Blue, deals with injured and disabled officers literally every single day. And there is a strong nexus here between your product and being injured in the line of duty. So I am really encouraged by what you have created here as another protection, because our officers need all the protection they can get right now, and every level, and your commitment to law enforcement, even at the expense of not getting your Chick-fil-A franchise, is to be commended. I'm never going to let you live that down. I just want you to know that, Doug. So
That's right.
anything else you want to bring up before I mosey on with news and information?
Yeah, real quick, I do think that you and I are, you're looking at the physical aspect of wounded, but now, like I said, you shot somebody, you're terminated, and you're locked up in jail. And how are you dealing with that mentally also? And you got a wife and two kids, she works at a flower shop. I mean, how do you deal with that? So, to hopefully ease some of the anticipation or angst of being charged with a crime and being, put in jail, I think these two do go together.
And that is the unfortunate new reality of policing, is that we all have to worry about that because we know that there is so much. I call it the politicization of police punishment, and that's probably something I'm going to talk about a little later on in the show. But once again, Doug, thank you so much. How can officers obtain this product again?
Yeah, just www.thinbluedefend.com, and we have a link there for email if you want to contact us and talk about, what the app does, and get in touch with us about pricing. But yeah, through the website, that's the best way.
Fantastic. Well, Doug, thanks so much for taking the time to join me here on The Voice for American Law Enforcement, and you and I will talk again soon.
Man, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. While we are on this topic of how officers can defend themselves, I want to tell you, for all of my law enforcement audience, we have just announced that the second annual National Law Enforcement Survival Summit is going to be held this year, October 11th through the 14th, in Terre Haute, Indiana. Now, this is 4 days of some of the best training you will ever receive in your law enforcement career. It is every aspect about surviving a law enforcement career, physically, tactically, emotionally, psychologically, relationship-wise. There's so much here because, when that time comes where you are, facing some of the most difficult challenges in your life, the time to prepare for it is before. Now, the trajectory of the Law Enforcement Survival Summit, we had the first one last year in Las Vegas. It was incredibly well received. There were officers there from all over the nation, and this is designed for every single rank, from a patrol officer to a chief. I urge you, it is not an expensive deal. The fee is like $295 for 4 days of training, and then the hotel is $100 a night. You fly into Indianapolis. It's about a 45-minute jaunt to Terre Haute. We'll arrange that transportation. So go to www.thewoundedblue.org. That's thewoundedblue.org. Hit the event button, and you'll read all about it, and then you can sign up to it through Eventbrite. Any questions about this? If you are a police chief or administrator and you want to send a group of your officers, contact me at randy@thewoundedblue.org. That's randy@thewoundedblue.org, and we will make those arrangements for you. We're holding it in the Midwest this year because we know that the number of officers in the Midwest who have been facing life and death struggles has risen dramatically. So once again, thewoundedblue.org, the second annual National Law Enforcement Survival Summit. Some of the most incredible presenters, Dave and Betsy Smith, who are legendary trainers, Jason Schechterly, the Phoenix police officer, whose story of survival will just bring you to your knees. Sheriff Mark Lamb, America's sheriff. The whole lineup is just incredible. So, thewoundedblue.org. Hit the events button, sign up for the National Law Enforcement Survival Summit. Now, why should we even have something like the National Law Enforcement Survival Summit? And this once again, I'm going to talk about everything that's happening in law enforcement. Let's talk about, it seems like every show, there's a couple areas of the country that always come up. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, because they are such a mess when it comes down to law enforcement and the anti-law enforcement lobby. And it truly is. Philadelphia, what's happened to our nation when a headline like this can come out? Philadelphia juvenile brothers 10 and 14 turned themselves in for the beating death of a 73-year-old man. Now, there's some video attached to this story, which is, it's almost impossible to believe that we have created these mutant children because of the out-of-control violence in our nation's major cities. And this is just, it's mind-blowing. This is from Fox News. Video released by Philadelphia police shows the 73-year-old man walking down a street, that's all he's doing, before he's attacked by several teens. Two juvenile brothers aged 10 and 14 turned themselves into the Philadelphia Police Department's homicide unit for their involvement in the murder of a 73-year-old man, James Lambert, who was beaten to death by a group of teens. Disturbing video surveillance of the incident released by police shows the group pursuing the man on a street before striking him with traffic cones. Now, this occurred at 3 a.m. Now, don't you wonder what kind of parents let their kids, 10 years old, roam the streets at 3 a.m., okay? Are you seeing maybe a problem here? One of the juvenile suspects appeared to video the attack with a cell phone as the others chased the victim down the street. And, this is from the victim's niece says this: "I just don't understand what's going on in our city. He walked that path for 60 to 70 years of his life, and for his life to be snuffed out like that is unbelievable." I excuse me. I'm rarely at a loss for words when it comes down to, the issues of crime in America. But what have we become as a nation when we when we have children that are so disengaged with compassion and empathy that they are capable of killing another human being, beating them to death. Now, do you know how personal that is? What it looks like? I mean, I've seen beating deaths, okay? In my 34 years as a cop, it's the most hideous thing you can imagine. How can a 10-year-old be capable of that? And so I'm going to bring up another, on the way to filming today, I was exposed to a news story also on Fox News, and it's shocking. This is a 2.5 or 3-year-old toddler, is seen verbally attacking and then physically attacking a uniformed police officer, cussing him out, telling him, the most vile language imaginable, and then attacking him. A 3-year-old, 2.5 or 3-year-old. How is it possible? What the parents or whoever was the one responsible for bringing this child up and giving that child the exposure to this type of vitriol should be in jail. This is child abuse. Think about this. This kid is attacking a cop when he's 3 years old, verbally and physically. What's going to happen when this little mutation is 15 or 16? And then because he's attacking the police, now he's not just, now he's emerged into the anti, the hatred of law enforcement. Do you think that this attack is going to be just with his hands or feet, or is he going to pick up a weapon because he's so engaged in this hatred of law enforcement? And then the police are going to wind up defending themselves, or he's going to wind up killing a cop, or the cop is going to wind up killing him. And then it's going to be, look at what the police did. The parents of this, or whoever the family, I don't even know. I have no idea what the family situation is of this kid, other than clearly he's been exposed to nothing but violence and anti-law enforcement rhetoric that is deeply scarred this kid. And of course, how do you deal with it? Watching the police officer try and calm this child down and try and explain that his behavior was wrong, you're wasting your time, right? Once you've indoctrinated children into hatred, listen, the Nazi Germany did it, right? In the 30s, it created an entire generation of people that hated others because of their religion or the color of their skin. And now we're seeing it right here in this country, where children are being indoctrinated, and including in the schools. Don't think that the schools aren't part of this, especially under the lens that we have now seemed to, everything looks under, this racist lens, right? Everybody is accusing the police of being the racists. And the schools are part of this process. The schools are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And as we see this continue to degenerate into a generation, indoctrinating a generation of children who believe that the police are the enemy, we're going to see more and more of the violence on the streets, both in terms of the anti law enforcement rhetoric, where police officers are being attacked, and also the community at large. That when there is so much disrespect for the law, and this call to challenge the law on every street corner, you're going to continue to see what the fabric of our nation erode, as we have been seeing it across America. We have almost become inured to the incredible crime surges in our nation's cities. it's happened so frequently. And so now we're going on literally a couple of years of unprecedented crime growth, that for lack of a better word, that now it's becoming the norm. And that is sad. That's why, so I'm going to tell you about this book that I've got coming up, because it is all about this topic. The book is called Rescuing 911, The Fight for America's Safety. And you can get on the website and take a look at it and sign up to get notified when it comes out by going to rescuing911.org. Then just put in your email and we'll let you know when the book comes out. It's probably going to be a couple months. But it is a call to action, because what has happened in America with the anti-law enforcement movement is critically important. And as Americans, if we don't recognize that we are being subjected to an entire lobby of acceptance of criminality and a lack of any consequences for that criminality, we're going to continue to be less safe. And when I say less safe, I'm talking about like that 73-year-old man in Philadelphia being beaten to death by a 10-year-old. That's not normal in a society. But this is the mutation of our society being pushed by the anti-law enforcement lobby. So this book, Rescuing 911, it's already happening in America where you can call 911 and nobody's coming, because law enforcement has been so devalued that there aren't enough cops to even answer the 911 calls. So go to rescuing911.org, sign up to get the book, read about it, and then join together, because this is a call to action that we must all band together for the good of our nation and the safety of our families. Rescuing911.org. I was talking to a police officer yesterday, a Phoenix police officer. And every police agency in the country is facing issues about recruitment and retention. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten in Phoenix. They are down hundreds and hundreds of officers, and they gave a police test. Now, Phoenix used to be considered one of the best agencies in the country. It's still considered a top agency. But do you know how many people they were able to graduate from their recent police academy? 5. You heard me right. Not 50, not 500, but 5. And this is after they just had almost 300 retirements and resignations. 5 officers graduating in an entire police academy. And this is like a drop in the bucket. Well, what do you think that's doing to the safety of the people in Phoenix? They are now having to not answer a lot of calls. So when I talk about rescuing 911, I'm serious. This is real stuff here. If there are not enough police officers on the street, you're in danger. Your family is in danger. And our society is in danger. So, talking to this Philadelphia officer, I was like, what are you guys, how are your countermeasures? What are you doing to recruit? And he told me flat out, he says, we're failing in our recruitment. And this isn't, they're not the Lone Ranger here. There was just a police test given in St. Louis. Now, St. Louis is like ground zero for anti-law enforcement rhetoric and politicians. Their mayor hates the cops. Their senator hates the cops. It is just a anti-law enforcement environment. You know how many people showed up to take the police test? 0. Now, this is unprecedented in American history, I can tell you. When I first was hired as a cop, I'm not even talking about how many years ago it was in a small community in New Jersey where there were only 30 police officers. and they only hired one every like 3 or 4 years. I'm going to say probably pretty close to 1,000 people showed up for that test. When I tested for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, there were 5,000 applicants for that job. 5,000. Now they're lucky to get a couple hundred. And then what is happening is that police agencies, in order to attract at least a warm body that may be able to be stuffed into a uniform, they're diminishing. Many departments are lowering their standards for hiring. This is exactly the opposite of what needs to take place. We need the highest quality people to join the ranks of policing. And if we don't, this is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of misconduct and corruption. Now, as a 34-year cop, I saw police misconduct. For me to sit here and say it doesn't occur, I would be disingenuous and I'd be lying to you. But I have seen law enforcement evolve over my decades and professionalizing and being more sensitive when it comes down to the issues of use of force, of race, and development and evolving is part of human nature, and you can't push a button and change culture immediately. But I have watched the culture change, and it has been much more hardy, the culture of change in law enforcement, than many people give it credit to. And yet you still see the anti-law enforcement lobby just demonizing law enforcement across this country. Here's a headline which illustrates that. Violent mobs attack Chicago police in 2 separate incidents. This is from Police Tribune. Violent mobs attacked Chicago police officers in their vehicles in 2 separate incidents, and at least one officer was injured in the chaos. The first incident occurred at the Six Corners intersection when a violent crowd attacked a police SUV. The officer was patrolling the area when someone threw something at the law enforcement vehicle and smashed the windshield. The officer called for backup, and when additional officers arrived, the crowd erupted into chaos. Cell phone videos of the attack posted to social media, of course, showed the crowd surrounding the police vehicle, kicking and banging on them. Some of the mob even jumped on the police vehicles and pounded on the windshields. One officer was hurt during the melee, had to be transported to the hospital. No arrests. Second incident occurred shortly after midnight. Cell phone video showed a crowd in the loop advancing on police vehicles that had their lights on as the officers slowly backed away. Videos showed fireworks being shot directly at the police vehicles stopped in traffic. Several of the incendiary devices struck their intended targets and exploded. No injuries were reported during the second attack, and no arrests were made. And yet, in that same holiday weekend, July 4th, 54 people had been shot between Friday and Saturday nights. You have lawlessness and a complete lack of fear of consequences by these animals that are attacking the police. And I don't really give a damn about political correctness here. If you're going to try and hurt a law enforcement officer with either a weapon or fireworks, which can kill or blind, you're an animal, and you deserve to be dealt with as at the level of defending your life as far as being a police officer. Here's the thing. I was doing a national TV interview, and somebody asked if I could change what's happening involving policing, what would it look like? And I said, I would bring back the fear. And the interviewer looked at me askance and said, what do you mean? I'd bring back the fear of the police. And the interviewer said, well, isn't that the antithesis of what we're looking for? I said, no, because you should be fearful of putting your hands on a police officer. You should be fearful of the consequences of what's going to happen if you resist arrest. You should be fearful of attempting to injure an officer. You should be fearful of trying to undermine an arrest or take a prisoner away from a cop. These are things that you should be fearful of. And unfortunately, as we have emasculated law enforcement in the sense of telling cops, don't put your hands on people, don't use force, don't do this, don't do that, you're going to get in trouble. We have taken law enforcement and we have literally taken the teeth out of the tiger. And unless there are consequences for crime, you're going to continue to see mobs like this attacking law enforcement officers. And then the police are surrendering and just backing off and saying, we're not even going to make any arrests here. That should be fearful. That should be a fear of every single American. Because if the police officers can't defend themselves or won't defend themselves, what's it going to look like for you when they're asked to defend you? This is the very nature of what's happening in America today. And yet, then, remember I said, I'm always talking about Chicago, New York, LA. And yet you have another activist district attorney in Manhattan, Bragg. And what does he do? I mean, he doesn't want to prosecute anybody for anything. But here's a headline. New York City bodega owners urge District Attorney Bragg to drop murder charges against Jose Alba. If you haven't followed this case, this is shocking. New York City bodega owners are calling on Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg to drop murder charges against a clerk who killed an ex-con that was attacking him. The calls for mercy come as city council members on both sides of the aisle have asked the embattled district attorney to drop the charges. Alba, 61 years old, was seen on camera fighting off an attack from this punk named Austin Simon, 35 years of age, who was attacking him and beating him. And in order to defend himself, the store clerk stabbed this punk and he died. Well, too bad. And then the suspect's girlfriend stabbed Alba. They didn't even charge her. No. Who does the district attorney charge? He charges the guy who is being attacked. This world has gone mad. And at least the public is the outcry from this is beginning to crescendo. There needs to, just like the district attorney in San Francisco was just recalled. Hallelujah. Chesa Bowden, one of the worst district attorneys in the country. Now there's a major movement afoot to get rid of Gascon, the district attorney in Los Angeles. There is a movement to impeach Krasner in Philadelphia, who has led to this attack by children who are murdering people. The soft on crime district attorneys, the correlation is so clear that it's stunning. Well, now Bragg needs to be recalled or impeached, whatever the methodology is used in New York. But how do these people get elected? Well, through incredible amounts of money, much of it provided by George Soros. So I'm going to read this. George Soros is one of the most evil creatures on the planet. He's been funneling millions and millions of dollars into the anti-law enforcement lobby. And now he is trying to purchase every single Spanish radio station in order to flood that with disinformation. Now, I could go on and on and on, but we're coming to the end of our show, and I want to talk about two things. One, police officers, the war on cops. One of the ways that my law enforcement officers who are listening, you need to go to officerprivacy.com. You need to go to officerprivacy.com because that is a measure of protection for you and your family. It's technology. It was created by a retired police officer, and he has been incredible in safeguarding the ability to dox you on the internet, because your information is out there. You need to get that information off the internet, where you live, the cars you drive, your wife. And the only way to do it is officerprivacy.com. Go to it, reach out to them. It's not expensive. It can literally afford a level of protection for you and your family, and it is critical. So go to officerprivacy.com. They're great people over there. It's law enforcement owned, and they're doing amazing work. Officerprivacy.com. So at the end of this show, I do what's called end of watch, and I can't believe the number of officers. There's been a 2-week hiatus in this show because I couldn't film last week, but I'm gonna read you those officers who've given their lives in the line of duty. Police Officer Jacob Russell Chaffins, Prestonburg Police Department, Kentucky. Captain Ralph Frazier, Police Officer Jacob Chaffins, Deputy Sheriff William Petrie of the Floyd County Sheriff's Office were shot and killed in Allen by a subject who was wanted for domestic violence offenses. These officers, including a canine, were ambushed. More officers were shot. Police Officer Jacob Russell Chaffins, Prestonburg Police Department, Kentucky. Captain Ralph Frazier, Deputy Sheriff William Petrie, Floyd County Sheriff's Office. End of watch, Friday, July 1st, 2022. Sergeant John K. Williams, Coralville Police, Iowa, passed away after suffering a medical emergency following response to a shooting call involving a 3-year-old. Sergeant John K. Williams, Coralville Police, Iowa, end of watch, July 3rd, 2022. Detention Officer Jeremiah James Story, Perry County Sheriff's Office, Arkansas. He was shot and killed while processing a subject into the Perry County Detention Center. He was standing in the restroom while the subject, who had been arrested for drug charges, was changing into jail-issued clothing. The man produced a pistol that he had concealed and shot and killed Officer Story. Detention Officer Jeremiah James Story, Perry County Sheriff's Office, Arkansas, end of watch, June 22nd, 2022. Sergeant Richard Lopez, Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, Arizona, was shot and killed while attempting to arrest a subject near Stagecoach Trail at 12:45 p.m. He had responded to the area to investigate a theft and located the suspect nearby. The man shot him before fleeing and then barricading himself. Sergeant Richard Lopez, Yavapai County Sheriff's. End of watch, Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. Reserve Officer Jeffrey Richardson, Petite Police Department, Texas. Now, I got to tell you, reserve officers generally work for free, putting their lives on the line. Reserve Officer Jeffrey Richardson was struck and killed by a drunk driver while directing traffic in a construction zone near Austin. He was working a secondary employment assignment when he was struck at about 2 a.m. Driver who struck him was intoxicated assault. He had 5 children and a wife. Reserve Officer Jeffrey Richardson, Petite Police Department, Texas. End of watch, Wednesday, June 29, 2022. Deputy Sheriff Bradley Johnson, Bibb County Sheriff's Office, Alabama. Deputy Sheriff Brad Johnson succumbed to a gunshot wound sustained the previous day at about 5 p.m. while he and another deputy were shot by an auto theft suspect. Deputies pursued the stolen vehicle until it stopped, and the man opened the door, opened fire, striking Deputy Johnson and the second deputy. Deputy Johnson passed away from those injuries. Bibb County Sheriff's Office, Alabama. End of watch, Thursday, June 30th, 2022. Hundreds of police officers dying in the line of duty, many being attacked by armed suspects. May they rest in peace. Well, this is the end of our show for the day. I urge you to support injured and disabled officers by going to thewoundedblue.org. These men and women are heroes. They need your help. It's a nationwide 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to aid injured and disabled officers throughout this country, whether those injuries are physical or emotional. Go to thewoundedblue.org, see how you can help. If you are an officer, you want to look at the second annual National Law Enforcement Survival Summit. Go to thewoundedblue.org, look under events, and sign up for it. You can be a hero to these men and women, and they need you to step up. Thewoundedblue.org. Thanks for joining me again on another episode of The Voice for American Law Enforcement. You can find me on Facebook at The Voice for American Law Enforcement. Also, you can follow the Facebook and social media of The Wounded Blue. See how you can support those men and women. If you want to contact me at randy@thewoundedblue.org. Thanks again for joining me. Stay safe and back the blue.